Yo, happy new year to all of you out there. My name is Jack Gardiner, and I know it's been a little bit of a while since I've done a video like this, but I had like the first extended period of time over the holiday period to kind of think about what I want to achieve with guitar in 2025, some of the goals and practice routines that I want to get into. So this video is kind of like a way of breaking the rut for me, and it's a reminder to myself, but I think some of these points might help you as well in the future and this year when it comes to practice and getting the most out of this instrument. Now, before we dive into some of these points, I should just point out that improvisation you heard at the beginning there, I was actually terrified to post that. I listened back to it and I was like, man, there's so many slips and things aren't sounding tight, or, I didn't really like some of the lines. I was thinking, should I do this all again? But it got me to the point where I'm like, why? What is the point in that? That is a true snapshot of where you are on this day in January 2025. And it's brutally honest. It gives you obviously some cool things that you can take and you can go, oh, I liked this line or I liked that line. Maybe some of it was okay. But a lot of it was filled with maybe technical errors or just not so good phrasing and stuff like that. It gives me an idea of what I need to work on. So my very first point would be, make sure that you are recording yourself. It can be in a DAW, it can be simply on an iPhone, So long as you've got access to some kind of camera or audio recording, I think that is the best way to kind of log your playing and see where you can make improvements. And it's also cool to look back on, like maybe after a year of playing and recording videos regularly or audio regularly, you can then go back and go, I improved this, or I improved this, or maybe this still needs to be worked on. This is an area which I haven't focused my attention to. That could be technique, it could be phrasing, it could be time feel, it could be actual note choice, It's all of these different things, but the camera or the recordings don't lie, especially now in a world where so much of what you see on like YouTube and Instagram when it comes to guitar is highly, highly edited and polished to death. I think it's really important that you see what you are like authentically as a player without any of that kind of stuff that you see going on the internet, So, first point, record yourself, absolutely. Moving on to my second point then, and this comes down to guitar practice itself. For me, over the past few years, especially when like this kind of online world has taken over, I haven't had as much time to practice. Now I have kids as well, and I'm sure there are parents out there watching this that can relate. It's very, very hard to plan any kind of solid time to dedicate to this instrument. And so it got me thinking, well, how do I change that in 2025? 2024, mainly for me, most of my stuff, I'm fortunate that it was for the job, as in it was for music anytime I play guitar, but I had very limited time to actually do focused practice. And to be honest, even when I was younger, I never really had this kind of focused practice with a practice plan or a warm-up routine. I see loads of these videos on YouTube where they're 30 minutes long of like, try out this technique workout. And I'm sure they are really helpful for a lot of players. That's just not the way which I did it. For me personally, like I spent 8 hours, sometimes more if I had the time as a teenager, just playing something over and over and over again until I felt like it was there, and I had the luxury of time back when I was a teenager. Nowadays we don't. So my kind of plan for this year is to switch that, and I'm basically just logging what I've practiced. I don't necessarily have ultimate kind of goals of every day of exactly what I want to do. What I will tend to do is pick just like a line or a phrase that appeals to me, maybe some technique based stuff. And I will work on that, but log the time I've actually done on it. I'm just simply using the Notes app on iPhone. I'm sure there are way better apps out there for you guys that are well into the kind of self-help and self-organization planning stuff. But for me, using the Notes app and just seeing a physical representation of how many hours, or in most of the cases, it's not even that these days, but at least like an hour of one certain idea, that is super helpful. And I'm planning on doing this every day. So that at the end of every month, I can look back, total up those hours and go, oh, did you actually put in that much time this month? Maybe at the end of the year, I can total them all up and see exactly what's going on. It's worth pointing out in those notes as well, what I do is I just simply write what exactly it is I've worked on. Today there was some kind of chordal stuff which I discovered, which I'd never played before. I wrote out some formulas of how I could use that. It was only something simple like this shape, which I was like, that can be used as like a melodic minor idea. That can be F minor major 7 or, minor major 13. It can be substituted for that. It could also be used as this kind of shape where it's a dominant sound. That's kind of like a dominant 7 sharp 9 sharp 5. I just write that in the notes, essentially. Anyway, I digress. I think actually seeing visual representation of this, similar to recording, physically seeing that in the phone helps me to gauge just how much work I've actually done. And maybe in the future, I can even, refine that and get more out of the time, which I'm actually practicing myself. Let's move on to the next point. I probably sound like a broken record on this channel when I talk about this, but transcription is honestly the best way to get better at guitar quicker. Now, I know there are tons and tons of videos out there with shortcuts and the secret hacks to get, better at the modes or get better at, learning your arpeggios and stuff. There's no secrets. There's no hacks. It's simply time. There are maybe things that will help you improve quicker in terms of the concepts and the theory behind it or visualization behind it, but it simply takes a lot of time. Transcription, on the other hand, can help to get you closer towards your goal quicker, and the goal should always be music at the end of the day. What I tend to do these days is try and transcribe at least a little bit of something every single day. Last year, I didn't have the good fortune to be able to do that all the time, but this year it's kind of like my big goal. And it can be something as little as a tiny phrase, or, it can be a whole solo. For me, that was never really 100% beneficial. But transcription, it doesn't mean going online and typing in and finding a tab of something and off you go. That can work, but it's always better, I think, to try and work it out yourself. Either, take the video and slow it down, or do it in real time if you can. That's even better. But with transcription, you're basically gaining language, and that's how I try to view most of music. Especially if you're a young player at the moment, I would say you should try and be like a musical sponge. Listen to loads of different types of guitar players and just try and absorb little lines, little, licks, phrases. Doesn't have to be full solos, like I said, but also expand that palette and look at bass guitar, look at saxophone players, piano players, all of these different things to just give you a different perspective. Now, I don't mean that you need to transcribe a whole solo every day. If you can, amazing, but just little fragments of information can often lead to massive amounts of inspiration. At least that's where I find it when it comes to transcription. I mean, today I looked at a Matteo Mancuso thing. Matteo is one of my favorite players, and he's such a good lad as well. But it was him playing over Spain. There was a little bit of vocab that popped out to me when he was playing over the 5 chord, over this, moving towards the G major 7. He played this line. Which is like ear candy for me. I absolutely love what he was doing. I wouldn't just learn that lick though, and that's done. I mean, that would serve great maybe as a technical exercise. It's quite tricky in terms of what's going on with the picking and the left hand, the synchronization. But I'll try and analyze what it is I like about that line and basically relate it back to the chords. The first thing I saw there was he was playing like a diminished idea with some chromaticism to wrap around as an enclosure around that G. So just this part of the line I could use anytime I see this E7 chord. And that could move to obviously G, but it could also move to like an E minor 7. So I'm thinking of the context in which it can be played. You know, diminished scale is a kind of symmetrical scale. So I could take that same idea and move this around. And see how I can resolve to these chords, whether it's like G major 7 or E minor 7. It's this kind of idea where just that one fragment can lead to so many different ideas. You know, even the second half of that line. I love that just as a little fragment. That works over E minor 7, works over G major 7, obviously. I can play it here. This is my point. Transcription is more than just learning solos and replicating what other people have done. It's how you can adapt that, steal that language, absorb it into your own playing, and see how it works for you, you know? So that would be my other point. Try just one little thing every day. See how it changes your guitar playing. This brings me on to my next point then, and that is time feel trumps note choice, at least for me. You might be thinking, what are you on about? Well, I would much rather hear a player with amazing time feel, but maybe some questionable note choice or phrasing, than a player that's got amazing phrasing, but no sense of time or no sense of time feel whatsoever. That is impossible to listen to for me. Now, I think this is a modern problem. You know, most of the time guitarists these days are probably just playing in a studio with backing tracks or a metronome, things like that. And while there is nothing wrong with that, and it definitely does help to develop an internal clock, I would argue that playing with other musicians or playing without that metronome and backing track is going to really help to develop your own internal clock much better. It's another point maybe completely, but playing with other musicians, especially ones that are better than you, can teach you so much about where you are as a guitar player, how to sit into the band, but also how to develop that internal clock. I was very fortunate enough to play with some amazing musicians that were way better than me back in my formative years of playing, you know, playing in covers bands, function gigs or sessions and stuff like that. And that helped me to develop this internal clock. You know, on the flip side, you can play with guys who maybe aren't as confident with their time feel. You know, say you've got a drummer that sways a little bit, then that can teach you a lot as well in terms of you have to dictate that time feel to them. You know, you dictate your own internal clock towards them and see if you guys can lock in together. So I'd say in 2025, if you can get together with another musician and just jam, even if it's just another guitar player or a bass player or whatever, then that is super important for personal development when it comes to time feel. Now, one little thing which I love to do personally is to do this exercise whereby I'll have no backing track, no kind of click track or anything like that, record myself playing and see if I'm playing with enough conviction so that you feel the time as well. Now, it will never be perfectly in time because everyone's internal clock is slightly different. We're not a machine, essentially. But it's just a great way of seeing where you are at the moment and seeing where you can make some improvements. So I'm going to give this a go in a second. First, though, I'd point out, you know, I'm taking this from the drummer's kind of notebook. Physically moving something can help with that internal metronome too. Most drummers are physically moving all the time to play their instrument. And I think as guitar players, we can take from that, even if we're just tapping our foot or moving our knee or bobbing our head, whatever it is that you want to do to move, you know, whatever you're into, even if it looks a little bit silly. If it's just to help you dictate time, then I would say physically moving something is going to help massively. I could do a whole course on this, and maybe if that's something you want to do in the future, let me know down below in the comments. But let's give this a go. So all I'm going to do is give myself a bit of a groove, and then off we go. 2, 3. something like that. There's probably loads of slips and stuff there, but it's just a good way of seeing how you are. And hopefully you can hear some of the conviction of my time feel there. Anyway, let's move on to the next point then. Next thing I'd like to talk about is all about subtleties. And what on earth do I mean by that? I think most of the time today, when you hear like playing on the internet, it's all about like either showing off technique or, you know, like working on pre-written stuff. A lot of stuff that's been edited. I know I brought that up a few times, but I think the biggest giveaway with a lot of these players is that there is no kind of attention to the smaller details. Now, what I mean by this is things like vibrato, string bending, manipulation. These are all things that are very difficult to edit, and I can see that's why it's not there. But I mean, focusing in on the quality of your notes and how you can manipulate the strings, your dynamics and all that kind of stuff is massively important, and it should never be neglected, especially now, you know, when things are moving towards like AI and stuff like that. That's going to be able to replicate note choices, but I'm not so sure if it's going to be able to replicate the subtleties of a player. You know, I can usually tell when there's like an AI guitar thing. It just lacks all of that character of a human touch. And it's one thing that if you want to kind of stay relevant, I guess, as a guitarist in the future, we don't know where this technology is going, then I would suggest you work on this and develop in your own voice. You know, like if you take a simple phrase like, that was a bit of a rubbish one. Something like that. Seeing how we can manipulate that so it's not just those notes. You could get play it in different areas of the fretboard. You know, slight variations. It's all of this kind of stuff. Pick attack, dynamics, vibrato, you know. All of this stuff that really plays into developing your own voice on the instrument. And it's one thing you should definitely not neglect. I know people want to get things as clean as possible these days and, you know, get the lines down, the crazy sounds, but don't forget about that. Some of my favorite players, Andy Timmons, Eric Gales, all of these guys, they can play one note. I know it's the cliche, but it hits you like a shotgun. And that, for me, is arguably most important. It's what makes music music. It kind of brings me on to my final point, and that is that you should always be doing anything to do with guitar with the goal of it being musical at the end. I know a lot of people might have different goals, you know, like maybe you just want to get that alternate picking line down as fast as possible, you know, 200 and whatever BPM, and that's fine. But I would argue that you should want to put that into a musical context ASAP. Don't think of it like the gym with reps, unless that's your goal as a guitar player. But for me personally, and I'm sure for a lot of you out there, it's about creating music. That's why we get into it. You know, we listen to our favorite bands or favorite artists and we want to be like them. We want to be able to create something organic and something that people want to listen to. So I'd say make sure you are listening to lots of other music. That's something that I definitely did do in 2024. You know, the amount of planes and train rides and stuff like that. I was constantly trying to listen to new things, but also composing. And it's worth me pointing out that, you know, in the background last year, I've been writing a new album, solo music, and with some amazing guests, people I would never imagine would want to grace my music with their notes or their playing, you know. So I'm super excited to share that with you. And it's another thing that I would say is try and compose. That's something which I neglected for maybe years, really. And it's a bit of advice I got from my brother from another mother, Owain. And that is like, if you are into composition, just try writing something for 30 minutes every day. You know, it doesn't have to be an amazing piece of music. It's just something that it's like a muscle. You're essentially working on it and you write down those ideas. You never know where that's going to end up. It could become a full song. So the camera battery actually died there, so I'm just jumping back in. But I would say then, yeah, you know, try all of these things. And to kind of round this off, I just hope that all of you have an amazing 2025. and you can achieve some of those guitar goals that you want to work on this year. You know, if you're interested in lessons or courses or anything like that, then please do check out my website down below. If you're new here, please do hit the like or, you know, subscribe and all that kind of stuff. It just helps the channel grow. Super excited to share some of this new music with you this year, and plenty of other things that are in the pipeline too. Anyway, guys, I hope you all have an amazing one. My name is Jack Gardiner. Cheers.